how Reiki works and how so many people, we talked about this the last week, so many people are really struggling with a lot of stressful situations in their life and all around us, so it's also a collective stress that we have talked about. And we've been talking this month about mind management, what Reiki is, how we define it, all those different topics. And it's so interesting to me how it all comes together. Because we talk about Reiki, when we're talking about Reiki and people ask me, what is Reiki? And I often will describe it as Reiki is a natural style of stress reduction, a Japanese natural style of stress reduction that also promotes healing. Well, the real truth of it, though, is the word Reiki is defining the energy. The system is the techniques that we use to access the energy and receive the energy, and then perhaps share it with others or deliver the energy. And so I think about that all the time, because saying Reiki is a Japanese stress reduction technique, the system is techniques. Drawing symbols, those are techniques. Placing our hands on ourselves or others and how we do that, those are all the techniques. The attunements are techniques in how we physically learn how to access the energy, because Reiki means the energy. Spiritually guided or universally guided life force energy. And so I think it's important to have, a clear awareness that the word Reiki means energy, the energy of it, the life force energy. And then we've developed systems of it over time. And we've talked a lot about that in this group, and how in the evolution of Reiki, different lineages have developed different techniques to access the energy and deliver the energy, receive the energy. So when I first learned Reiki, I thought about Reiki as a stress reduction technique, and it seemed so simple for what it really is, like a really, kind of almost just simplified version of what it is. And now over the course of more than 20 years of working with it, really understanding the impact that stress has on our lives. And so much more is understood now than even 20 years ago when I began with Reiki and thought that a stress reduction technique was too simple of a term for it. And we know that that is, because it is so much more than that. But what does that actually mean, and how does it do it? So if we look at the impact of stress, and I did a little bit of research on it from the Mayo Clinic and some other sites about the effects of stress. So we look at the physical effects of stress. So the physical can cause, of course, physical ailments that occur, blood pressure, fatigue, exhaustion. Then we have also the mental and emotional effects of stress. And that can be anxiety, depression, overwhelm. One of the categories that was a little unexpected for me was behavioral. And as soon as I saw the word, stress can also affect our behaviors, it clicked. I thought, that's really true too. Because when we add up all of these elements of what stress does to us in our life, it can also cause when you're feeling overwhelmed, a lack of clarity in decision making. It can cause, just I would say a common one might be saying things that it's like, ooh, I don't know if I can take that back. Some of those kinds of behaviors. And also just a lack of clarity in your priorities. So, really, stress really affects us in so many ways. The other piece that we've talked about in this group, and also I believe in, a commonality of people attracted to Reiki practices, is a lot of us are empaths. So not only do we have our own stress, but we pick up on the stress all the way around us. So, add stress to the stress. And then I always go to what are the solutions? And we've talked about that a lot. And in my own life, I prefer to stay stable, be kind. And stress can cause me to not feel stable and not be kind, or at least not be kind in my own mind, kind to myself even. So for me, I have trained myself, as we talked last week about mind management. I've really trained myself to think in terms of, okay, I'm out of sorts, something's off. In this case, like right now, I'm really stressed. What are my solutions? And so I've learned to stop and think that way. And so that comes to what we've also talked about with mind management is noticing, like noticing it. And here's one of the first things that I realized in how I like to practice mind management in solutions is taking that moment to notice. How am I? Sometimes you can only think it for a second, but in that moment, I had minutes to think about it. And you know what I realized is it came back to the things we talk about so often, is receiving the Reiki energy to help me manage it all. So that's the next step in the notice, shift, rewire, is receiving. So I shifted into just that Reiki on the fly that we talk about, because I only had minutes because I had more caregiving to do. And the Reiki on the fly, and I just let that energy come in. I use a lot of the distance symbol and also the mental emotional symbol for these. And then of course some of the Karuna, but those are my quick go-to in it. And so I received the answer and solution that I talk about so often, is that I realized in trying to manage all of the stress, I had started using my own life force energy. I had started, and I could feel it as soon as the moment I noticed it, the moment I recognized it, it was like, oh, that's what this has been. The output has been increasingly been my own life force. And recognizing that that is one of the most significant aspects of Reiki, is that it is the life force energy now we're using to care for others, care for ourselves, to create the field around us, and to manage it all. And so I took the time, I actually had to do very much Reiki on the fly, because I was literally when my husband's name is Robyn also. So husband Robyn and daughter Robyn. And so as you know, he took me and said, okay, I want you to stop and think, how are you? And once I recognized, just took that moment to notice, let myself receive the energy, that's when the solution kicked in, that, oh, let it flow through me rather than from me.
Mm.
And so I feel like that's a really important message, because as often happens, it also showed up with my client after that. That, oh, the same thing, when we're in the thick of it, a lot of times we're just trying to figure it out. We're just trying to manage things. How do we do it? What's the priority? It can be overwhelming. Our brain can, you know, lose track of everything. We get scattered out. So then I was thinking about the Reiki energy and what does that actually mean to let it flow through you? And how do you do that? And so the answer with it came in, and this was also really interesting because then I had a long conversation with someone about it afterwards, is receiving the energy. That we don't have to do anything. Reiki energy naturally reduces stress. It naturally helps our body, our mind, our spirit, and our behaviors, because it literally can help us catch our breath, help us take a moment, help us go deeper. And I noticed in just the quick invocation today that we did, inner truth was really highlighted. Like breathe in, and your breath is going to flow into your inner truth. So it's going to go through, the Reiki energy is going to go through all those external layers of those ways and worries of the world that are causing stress, take you into your inner truth. And from that place now, you're managing with your body, your mind, your emotions, and your behaviors. For me, because I like to think in terms of what are my solutions here? So number one question I'll ask, like, okay, I've got all this going on. What are my solutions? Because I feel like they show up, especially if I'm utilizing Reiki energy. So as I was researching the impact of stress on our systems, our bodies, I also was aware that there are a lot of skills, like actual, you know, skills that we can practice to work with stress. And one of the things that's always a heightened awareness for me is that I like and am interested in those skills. Like I like to research those things. I like to look it up. Like, what are the skills that help me do this? With Reiki, though, we also have the energy. So the energy of Reiki adds to our vitality. And our vitality doesn't mean now I can go out and run a marathon. The vitality is an inner self, inner feeling of having life force and vibrancy. Because that's one of the things that I will see in people. And it's why we talk about in these circles how Reiki adds color to you. It'll come back in and it'll fill those chakra centers with the colors of the chakras. Reiki actually, you know, is really well known for, empowering your colors. So the energy itself increases your vibrancy. And as a practitioner, I've absolutely seen that happen. And that is a stress reduction result, is an experience of being in your vibrancy. And so the way that that has shown up for me, because the way sometimes all of this shows up for me is metaphorical vision. So I'm not like so clairvoyant that I get exactly the same vision as something else, but my clairvoyance really works in a metaphor. So as I've seen that color vibrancy that Reiki adds to us, what I've seen is like the world goes from, gray tones or sepia tones, and the colors start coming back. And people may even notice or not notice that color starts coming back. The world gets a little more vibrant. It's funny, I was talking to my mother once, and she was not a fan of the rain in Oregon, and I am a fan. And one day I was talking about how beautiful it was out. And she said, but it's all gray. I was like, but look at the shades of gray. There's bright gray, there's dull gray, there's steel gray, there's all these grays going on. And for me, it was vibrant and beautiful. And for her, she naturally doesn't like the rain. So fair enough. So it's a little bit different example, but that's how it'll show up to me for people, is like that vibrancy that we can lose comes back with the energy of Reiki, the vitality, that inner life force, vitality. So then applying it to our practical life, how do we make that useful, is that when we add some of the skills, some of the questions, such as what are my solutions, and then use the Reiki energy to restore that vitality, vibrancy, mental clarity, that's when those solutions have room to reveal. And so the solutions may reveal through insight. They may not be like a physical solution that you can solve. It doesn't mean it fixes things. Sometimes for me, in this recent case, the solution was, oh, that's right. Let the energy flow through me rather than from me. So the solutions may show up physically. They may show up emotionally or mentally. They may show up behaviorally, and they may also show up spiritually. I also find one of the aspects of Reiki that helps reduce the stress is that as our minds clarify, not only do the solutions become apparent, but in my own experience of it, I feel like the Reiki energy helps reduce my stress by clarifying my priorities and making that easier to do. So I was thinking about that today, because sometimes part of that clarification of priorities for me has been learning that no is a complete sentence, and some boundaries where, a lot of times I've scattered my energy by not being clear within myself what my priorities are, and then what actions that would lead me to, or even inaction that it would lead me to, because sometimes it's a state of mind. So I've been thinking about all these different things and really kind of amazed at just how quickly they work. I feel like in that moment that I was able to notice where I was by just taking a moment. How are you? Where I was receiving Reiki. And that skill has probably been one of the biggest ones for me to learn, because I'm so ingrained as a kind of an overgiver that I've really had to train myself to receive. But Reiki, of course, works by receiving it. And so I've learned, before I try to figure it all out or decide things, it's that Reiki on the fly again. Sometimes I have lots of time and I do more self Reiki, or I'm receiving Reiki from another person and receiving, having my own personal sessions. And receiving the energy precedes the shift for me. The shift can occur through decision making. The shift can occur through conscious intention or skill. When we have Reiki energy, the energy itself promotes that ability to utilize those skills, to intend for the shift. Another one we've been talking about that really helps with that is, what does love do here? I'm going to say that again. What does love do here? What does love do here? That can help you also. It's another solution question. Another question I will utilize too is, what are my resources? And activate childhood wonder. And I know that seems like a completely different topic. But if you think of children and childhood wonder, they are the most resourceful beings. They can take a box and fly to the moon. They can, take just something small and turn it into something magical. So the childhood wonder, to me, is also a quality of Reiki energy. Color, vitality, vibrancy, wonder. What is empowerment? Higher consciousness. But when you think about childhood wonder, it's like you can just go into your authentic imagination, and a lot of your solutions are in your imagination. They start there. So now let's say we can take the same subject with Reiki for problem solving. We can also take the same exact examples for Reiki for innovation. Sometimes I feel like stress can be because we need problem solving, and it's really the truth in our life. And sometimes, it's very, very real that we have significant stressors in our life. But oftentimes some of the things that get, are not talked about as much with this type of a topic is, let's say you've got some kind of an innovation that's trying to come through. You can feel it. It's on the periphery. Every time you look at it, it moves. But you can feel it. This innovation's coming in. There's ideas here. There's insight coming through. But it's not quite there yet, possibly because of timing. But that can also feel like an energy of stress. And so we can also use Reiki energy to help you actually access that idea, insight, innovation, inventiveness, creativity that's trying to come through, that's trying to get in, and it comes back to receiving. So noticing, I noticed today that I had a lot of distracting thoughts, and I'd have to stop and think, that's not what I'm thinking about right now, because I knew I was coming on and talking about all this. And like I say, I love the subject and pretty much just talk off the cuff because I like the subject of how to use Reiki for life management as a life management tool. So it's what I like to think about, but I kept noticing my mind switching into other subjects that were not necessarily at all relevant, other than noticing they were a distraction. So now we go back to that notice, receive, shift. And then what happens once you shift and you shift into that innovation, it opens the door for insight. And those insights, again, may happen with Reiki on the fly, where the energy of Reiki and the insight in your own higher consciousness clicks in a moment when you're doing something completely different than listening with Reiki. At the same time, I like to use free writing. I use a lot of free writing. I'm a scribbler, and I don't worry about, like, I look back and sometimes I find my old, notebooks that I think, oh, I got to save this one. And it's just scribbles. Like, I could never make sense of it all, other than sometimes putting my pen to write to the, like asking a question or listening for what I need to listen for. I'll put my pen to paper and just write, or I'll do it on the computer too. I like to do free writing on the computer equally. So I'll just open up a document and start blah, 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 and writing stuff down. And one of the things I like about the computer is actually I can file it easier than when it's in a notebook. My notebooks, I never know where they are. So bringing in this awareness now of how you can use Reiki energy. And when I say on the fly, that's just a quick, okay, Reiki on. Sometimes I'm very specific about the symbols, other times I'm not. And other times I have more time. And so I'll just spend the time in self Reiki. Sometimes I'll even do self Reiki while I'm busy doing other things. And that's possible too. And then other times I'm, in that place where I get to spend like in-depth time with the energy and listening. One of the things that I learned when I'm in that in-depth time listening is a lot of times it feels like mind chatter. And it feels like my mind is super busy. But what I notice with the Reiki energy is when I'm in that place I'm thinking of is going to be quiet time, is it shuffles through all my different thoughts, the ones that need to release. I'm already set up with go ahead and release it. And the ones that have importance or something I need to be thinking about, or, perhaps even the thing that is stressful, I actually do need to think about, that it clarifies it, it prioritizes it, it lets go of the kind of junk mail in my head and brings in the things I actually need to be looking at. And then other times it's going to shift me into the beauty, new ideas, new innovations, feelings of joy, One of the ones that came in yesterday was humor. Like, just take some time to find something funny, just even if you're not feeling like humor, like just find something that's funny, and find your resources for the places that funny is for you. That's when Danny and I were talking this morning about all of this. She brought that to my attention, um, that self-care is so essential, and take the opportunity that's coming up for really doing something with self-care. So, Danny, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and I think also reminders of receiving. I mean, sometimes I even put "Thank you, Reiki," write it on a sticky note and put it where I can see it. I'm like, oh yeah, because sometimes we just forget that we have it. And so, and just seeing signs, like when you're driving and you see, a sticker on the back of a car, you're like, oh yeah, I can just ask for Reiki. So I think just being aware and observant.
Yeah, thank you. That was one of the best experiences. That was also like, okay, Reiki, how do you do this? And I've shared this story before, so some of you that have heard it, I'm going to share it again. But I was driving from Portland to Seattle on I-5, and it's a beautiful drive. I mean, the Pacific Northwest is just stunning. It's so beautiful. And I was trapped in some negative mind loop. I don't even know what it was. And so it shows you how important it was. And I mean, I'm just spinning off in this mind loop. And I was so like, I just want to look at the beauty. So I'd, notice, okay, beauty, blah, 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 right back at it. So I activated Reiki, and I'm like, help me change my mind. And literally, a car pulls up on my right, actually moved into the lane in front of me. And it had a bumper sticker that said, "Don't believe everything you think." And it was exactly true. I had totally made up this story that I was chewing on in my head. And it was like, talk about humor. I was like, whoa, like how do they orchestrate these serendipities? Like, amazing. And so true. I remind myself with that all the time. Don't believe everything you think. So anyway, Reiki for stress reduction. And the first thing that, like Danny just said, just receive. That's step one, just receive.